All right, well, that was the film. And I didn't mention at the beginning, but my name's Michael Yancey. And I, along with Russ Van Develt and a few others, worked on our solar project here at St. Stephen's, and I think that's how I got assigned this task to be a discussion facilitator today. I'm not exactly sure how to do that, other than to say, you've seen the film. I had not seen it until just now. What were your thoughts or impressions, and what do you think is worth discussing while we're here as a group? Somewhat interested in solar. I bet you all are to some degree.
She would like to know.
Well, Russ can probably speak to that better than I can. It's definitely made a difference in that we've used less, we've used a good amount of solar power instead of fossil fuel power or any of the other powers that, you know, are not healthy for the environment. So when we projected the project, we thought it would produce about 25% of our electricity. And Russ has been looking at that. Do you want to speak to that, Russ?
It's hard to compare, or it's misleading to compare. Hello? Anyway, due to the pandemic, you can't hardly compare what you used in 2022 with 2021 or 2020 because there was a lot less activity here. And so, and yet, it seemed like every year our costs go up some for utilities, for electricity. And so I got data from 2018 and 2019, and I averaged that, and I said, that's our average usage from a period before the pandemic. And then I compared that with 2022, which is pretty much back to normal. And and I'm not comparing dollars because the rates can change so much a kilowatt hour. I'm just comparing kilowatt usage. It was kind of a funny thing we saw that during the winter months, our kilowatt hour usage dropped due to the solar, which solar doesn't produce that much in the winter anyway, but it does produce some. But the summer months, our usage was about the same as it was in the base years of 18 and 19. Even though we had solar helping us, what we used from Alabama Power was roughly the same, maybe a little bit more. And the best we can tell is probably our thermostats need tuning up. I talked to the guy from Alabama Power and told him this, and he said, I think what you've got is, what did he call it, the thermostat bandit. So we've taken a look at our thermostats, and we can program them, of course, and we're in the process of doing that, and hopeful that rather than keeping this room 69 degrees all night, every night, we can set it up to 75 or 80 or something during the times that it's not used. And likewise, during the day, if it's not used, let's don't keep it at 69. That's what we're playing with right now, and we think that will help. We won't know until we have data into July, probably. That was a long answer. I apologize for that.
Russ, I have a question. Is the heat gas or is it electric for the church itself?
It's gas.
Okay, so you start using gas for heat during the winter, so the electrical.
Still electrical.
run the thing,
Right.
but then you're running the air conditioning with the power, the electrical. Okay.
I'm wondering, does anyone have solar at their residence? You do? And Russ, how long have you had it, and how do you like it?
I wish my husband was here. We just got it installed about a little over a month ago. And they're putting all kinds of new things on our system, so they keep having to come back out and tweak things. But my husband is thrilled, but of course we're just disgusted with the Alabama Power situation, so.
And we talked about before the whys. Could you touch on that a little bit? The why would you get solar panels in addition to being disgusted with Alabama?
Well, and for us, a big reason is because my husband goes around and speaks about climate change. And we felt like we better walk the walk.
Yeah, and that's, we were talking beforehand, and the whys, you know, I start with, well, it's doing the right thing in terms of using clean energy as opposed to fossil fuels or something else. And then from there, you go to the economics of the deal, and it's about saving money or trying to save money. And that's what this is talking more about. But most of the folks I know have solar, residential solar, because they start with the do the right thing approach. But done right, it does work out. And how long have you had yours at home, Russ?
About 2 years. First year, it was just panels, and any production that I didn't need, couldn't use, was just lost. You don't want to hook up to Alabama Power because it costs you more money then. So then the second year, I put batteries in. And so any excess I produce goes to the battery. And then when the cloud comes over or the sun goes down, I can use out of the battery. But I'm not self-sufficient by a long way.
What's your percentage?
I'd say solar produces 40 to 50%.
But we have trees, it's not open like on the film, you know,
Right.
out in the field or.
Are the leaves out or the leaves?
Well, that's right, that's right.
And so the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last year, I think, helped residential solar folks out a little bit by increasing again the federal tax credit. So if you buy a system, you can receive about a 26% tax credit on that purchase. That helps defray the cost. My understanding is the typical home system can run about $30,000, depending on the size, of course, and the different features, whether you have battery associated with it or whatnot. And I think the point where you pay for the system is somewhere in the 7 to 10 year range, depending on whatever your arrangement is. So what the film touched on was the solar tax we have in Alabama, and they explained that well. So we're trying to get over that, and we dealt with this a little bit when we were looking at the project for the church. We were interested in the federal credits because that helps significantly in paying for the system. But as a nonprofit, we don't pay income tax, so a federal tax credit didn't do us any good. And that was the problem. But in the Inflation Reduction Act, they have changed that federally, and so now nonprofits, they don't realize a tax credit because they still don't need a tax credit, but they can get a cash payment from the federal government equivalent to what the credit would have been. Or at least they're trying to iron all of those details out. That's the intent behind the act. So And that's just an incentive, it's a federal incentive to encourage people and organizations and businesses to use more solar power and less fossil fuel power. So that's what it's all about. Yes?
Position of Alabama Power regarding solar. I mean, they must have some official position towards it.
Is there anyone from Alabama Power here tonight or today?
I'm not, but I believe that they have invested in wind power significantly and some solar power.
You're right, they have. Carol just said she believes Alabama Power has invested in wind power projects as well as solar projects. And I think that's correct. There are some larger projects. And what's happening, has been happening for a number of years, is Alabama Power has tried, controls its business the way it does. But when large national or multinational corporations come into a place, they're often operating under a mandate of their own, because of their shareholders' initiatives and whatever else, to say their boards have passed mandates that say we want to be using 30% renewable energy across the entire enterprise, or 40%, and they have these goals. And when they move to Alabama and they don't have the same economic incentives tied into solar, then they look to other states where those incentives are greater. And Alabama Power finally caught up to that a little bit, and if a large plant comes in, a manufacturer, and they're operating under one of those mandates, they have begun partnering with Alabama Power, and Alabama Power has been building out or helping or allowing them to build out solar farms, to help meet that requirement. And so Alabama Power is not completely resistant to solar power. It's really just where we struggle, I think the film did a good job of describing the tension between the residential consumer on the one hand and Alabama Power on the other. One of the biggest things, and this goes back again to our project, you heard him talk about third-party financing. When you look across the country at the states where solar has really proliferated and they're really taking advantage of the opportunity they have because of, be it Florida or whatever, they're in a good spot with a lot of sun. That proliferation is driven largely by third-party financing arrangements, because they can come to you as a homeowner and say, you can have solar on your home at no cost to you. It just means that for the first 7 years or 10 years or whatever the term of the arrangement is, you're not going to own those panels. The company that puts them up is, and you're going to slowly buy them from the company through your savings that you realize on your electric bill. And we don't have that in Alabama because of the policies that are in place by virtue of the Public Service Commission. And as they say, they think Alabama Power is largely responsible for keeping the policies as they are through the PSC. So, yeah.
Do you know if you can avoid the tax by having a separate system for, say, charging your car that is not tied into the grid at all?
Well, I think Russ made that point. As long as you're not tied in through an interconnection agreement, then you're not necessarily subject to the tax. Yeah. And then, the give and take on that is you lose the whatever amount they would pay you when you're putting it back into the grid, but between the tax and the other complaint is that Alabama Power's the rate they will pay for that energy you put in is about the lowest in the country, and it's about I think it's 20 to 25% of what you pay them, you pay Alabama Power to use Alabama Power. So, I'm sorry. I was saying, if you put power back on the grid, they pay you essentially 25% of what they charge you for the electricity you take off the grid, if that makes sense. So they get about a 75% windfall on that. But anyway, any other questions or comments?
Has a cost analysis been done to give us a break point? At what point do we break even from the purchase of the product and the installation cost as to what we're saving?
Well, yes, and we're working on it. Two answers. We did those at the outset when we were planning the project and looking at the feasibility of it. And that, I think, is what Russ was touching on earlier when he talked about the work he's doing at looking at going back over the past years and trying to get a good set of data to crunch to find out where our break point's going to be. When we were doing in the planning stage, we looked at projections that put us at about it was between 7 and 9 years, I think, and then that kind of moved a little bit from, I want to say it was, in my brain, it was about 8 years was sort of the median on the projections. But I think what we're realizing, and Russ, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're lagging on that projection maybe, but maybe we don't know that. Is that right?
I didn't look at it exactly that way. I think it's producing what we thought it would produce. We have that data. It's just that we are consuming more than we used to consume. And on the Alabama Power buying back, we do have an interconnection agreement with them. I think Michael was able to, and the solar company was able to get a deal with them that wasn't so onerous as a homeowner. We pay them $50 a month for the privilege, and then we sell them what we don't need because we don't have any batteries here. And I did look at that, and their charge to us, including taxes and demand and all the different components of a bill, is about 14 cents a kilowatt hour. And they pay us between 2 and 4 cents for everything we sell them. So it's 20–25%, like you said.
I heard the bell ring, so I think that means our time is up. But thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the film.